second reading of House Bill 3497. Roll call is required in order. Voting on the board.
A whole lot of green going on the board. We usually start with someone yelling every Sunday here in South Carolina, but this week is something different. What you're seeing right there is 109 votes coming in favor of supporting a plan that would reform how liquor liability is handled when it comes to bars, restaurants, VFWs, people who serve liquor. 109 to 0. That's where we start this Sunday in South Carolina as we get you connected to the Capitol. We have talked a lot about liability in this state, lawsuits, things of that nature. Significant action in the House, though, this week. That's where we start with positive action. Of course, we welcome in Dave Wilson, Catherine Glenn Foster as well. We have talked about the more comprehensive Senate plan that tackles, let's just face it, everything when it comes to how lawsuits are filed in the state. This is a laser-focused plan that we're talking about here that the House passed on Thursday. 109 to 0.
Well,
that doesn't happen here.
That does not happen very often, especially in a state like South Carolina, where you have a group that can be very angsty on different issues. Yeah. But I think this is where you look at the House of Representatives in South Carolina, and they will stick onto a part of an issue and really be able to just say, we need to pass this bill. Because as you'll remember right now, there are plenty of places, businesses that restaurants and bars that have closed because the insurance rates have gone through the roof and they can't continue business while at the same time being able to pay exorbitant insurance rates, which is completely different approach than what I think we've been seeing right now in the Senate.
Correct. Their bill covers everything. From soup to nuts, as they say.
It really does. As you said, it touches on everything. Doctors, construction companies, and if you have ever at home, if you have ever had a procedure done in a medical clinic, you have probably received multiple bills, maybe from a surgeon, maybe a radiologist, x-ray tech, pharmacy, you name it, you get all kinds of different bills. Well, that's exactly the problem here, where all of the liability could get passed around among these different people. Yeah. It creates a problem. And so the House version here is laser focused. It gets really where we want to be looking at the liquor liability at your bars, your restaurants, your VFWs, to protect these small businesses, often family owned, from exorbitant insurance fees.
Absolutely. We have a graphic, Marcus, with some of the facts and figures about what this particular plan does in fact entail. And we didn't put everything in there, but just a few bullet points here. As you said, relief for bars, restaurants, VFW posts. They serve beer, they serve wine, they serve liquor. Expanding insurance options, which in turn lowers costs. Incentives for implementing, safety initiatives, training, mandatory liquor training, server training for bars and restaurants. No-brainers that people should be doing anyway, but now it's mandated if this becomes the law.
And we see that already, some of these are already in place in like convenience stores. Convenience store workers have to go through the same level of training. They have to learn how to ID. They can't sell unless you've actually demonstrated that you are over the age of 21 to be able to do that. And you've got bars and restaurants, the VFW posts, who are saying, listen, we're going to have some level of relief here. And when that actually got into a singular bill, the House did it, they got it, they were laser focused on it, and as soon as it got passed, it got tremendous response.
It did
from members of the Senate.
We did. I mean, and this is what we're talking about. Everyone, you go out for a meal, you have a glass of wine. That's what we're talking about here. If something were to happen to somebody, if a DUI type case, this is how this is what this bill handles.
Right.
And it impacts,
if you're victimized,
Right, and it impacts every South Carolina citizen, because whether you're a small business owner, maybe you run a little restaurant, or you just like going out to a restaurant and you wonder, why did that restaurant down the street, my favorite little home, exactly. Right. Yes, this addresses that and allows those small, maybe family-owned businesses to pop up and flourish.
Absolutely. You talked about the immediate support that was picked up. We had we saw on social media, it was where it was. Within moments of the House passing that measure on Thursday in the Senate, we had this tweet from Senator Tamika Isaac Devine immediately showing support. Send it over to us in the Senate. Yeah. We'll take care of it. This tort reform crusade that they're on over there, like we mentioned, that handles everything, the whole ball of wax, has become a bit of a boondoggle. And that's going to get us to our next point. Marcus, take it away.
We're done. Right? We're done. It's over. Congratulations, y'all. It's done. There will be businesses closed now because of this. Right. Mr. President, I move the Senate do now adjourn.
So that's over in the Senate on Thursday. The House is passing a measure. The Senate's handling their Godzilla-sized measure, and it looks effectively dead.
Well, at a vote of 25 to 18, you had a supermajority of Republicans who split away from the majority leader and basically said, your massive bill that dealt with liquor liability for a few sections of it, but all of these other insurance changes that went along with that, that thing just died on the vine right there. May they come back and pick up portions of it next week?
Maybe.
Perhaps, perhaps not. But you're recognizing right now that while there is a supermajority of Republicans, there is not a supermajority of opinions that all fall in line with each other, which is the reason why you want to be able to have 46 senators who represent different interests and see things in a different way. This is how that political process works itself out, because right now you had a lot of folks who were saying, listen, this is like a boondoggle thing for the insurance companies, because they're going to be able to have special things like we can have up to 10 months to be able to then turn around and decide on a claim. Well, if you've got a car accident or something's happened to your house, you don't have that long to wait. And so that's really what began to tear into this thing. And you had the governor who came out earlier in the week. You had the speaker have a press conference on this. You had the manufacturers. You had so many other people who were coming out for that. And yet at the same time, on the other side of the cameras, you had lawyers and victims who were saying, we don't want to have this.
Saying no. That was the infamous S-244 that you probably saw stuff all over social media about. Say, call your legislator, we don't want this. You saw it everywhere. So if you're not one of the political insiders, that's what that was.
Well,
and Senate Bill 244.
And they were saying that there are Trojan horses that are built into this.
Correct.
And if those Trojan horses are still in there, then what you don't want to have is that Trojan horse sitting in there as a bill, as part of the law, because then somebody gets hurt somewhere along the way.
Attack in the dead of night.
Find the loopholes.
Find the loopholes in it, exactly. And I think that we're now seeing, as much as Senator Massey turned around and said, you know, this is going to shut down businesses. We've already shut down businesses. We've already seen that happening. And these, as Catherine just said, these are like mom and pop businesses. These are places where these are your neighbors who are running a local restaurant, or they're running the bar that you go to, or the place that you go and hang out over the weekend. I mean, we've had a craft beer company right here in Columbia, over near the stadium, that just had to shut its doors.
Yeah.
Because it
After
couldn't
being there for
handle,
more than a decade.
Right.
Exactly.
Because it couldn't handle the high insurance rates. That's the issue that has to be dealt with right here. How do you deal with the high insurance rates?
And we find out if the Senate will retake that, but at least we know one piece of that pie was handled by the House, and it will eventually get over to the Senate. It was a busy week at the State House. Some very hot button issues as well. Abortion was also something that was talked about for quite a long time, Marcus.
Let women choose! Let women choose!
That was the line outside of the hearing room earlier in the week when a House panel heard testimony on what would effectively be a total abortion ban proposal in this state. People, hundreds, I'm talking hundreds of people, snaking around the grounds just for a chance for 2 minutes to testify in front of this panel. Not everyone got in there. That thing went on for more than 4 hours. They heard a lot of things, and most of it was, we don't want this.
That's right, 90% to 10%. South Carolina is, by and large, a state that considers itself pro-life, and yet 90% to 10%, the people who turned out to testify, hundreds of them, said, we oppose this. Even the people who said, we're pro-life, they nonetheless said, we oppose this. This goes too far. And you know what? Especially this year. This year, when we already have that heartbeat bill, that heartbeat law, going back up to the South Carolina Supreme Court.
Sitting there waiting for a judgment.
Yet again. So it seems like maybe not the best of times to be considering something even more extreme when we already have this bill that we don't have answers on yet.
No, we don't. Here's what we do know about it. There would be no exceptions for rape, incest, fetal anomalies. There is no 6-week. There's no
Right.
heartbeat law like there, well, a portion of it there currently is. And there would be just a small handful of medical conditions that would allow for a woman to undergo the procedure. So no significant action was taken. This
No.
was a listening session, I would say, from that group of lawmakers.
And just because a bill comes up for a hearing
Yeah.
does not necessarily mean it's going to continue to move through that entire process.
Correct.
Especially to Catherine's point, if you have 90 to 10, or a 9-to-1 ratio of people going, we don't want this, somewhere along the way, I think legislators begin to hear our folks aren't in favor of this.
And that's exactly why it is so important to come out and testify at the State House, no matter whether we're talking about abortion or some other topic. You need to come out and make your voice heard. Because I have testified all over the country, all over the world, on a variety of bills, and so often, frequently it comes to a vote, but so often it doesn't.
Yep. And
And that typically is because you get that kind of 9-to-1 ratio where people are just overwhelmingly opposed to some proposal. And the lawmakers say, okay, we're done. Let's table this for this year, see how the Supreme Court rules, and then
We'll go
determine.
from there.
Exactly.
Well, and the thing about it is you have the bill sponsor who lives in a very, very conservative section of the state in Greenwood County with Representative John McCravey. I mean, he basically put it out there and said, we want a bill that will absolutely eliminate abortion in South Carolina. And if you're pro-life, you understand that. If you're pro having a family of any way, shape, or form, the one thing you don't want to do from this standpoint, and I'm going to talk totally political, from the insiders at the State House perspective, when you have a bill that's like that, you're expecting the rest of your Republican or pro-life colleagues to fall in line. And that puts people in jeopardy in their future races because not everybody lives in the most conservative areas of Greenwood County.
Yeah.
You've got some folks who are down in Charleston. You have folks in Florence. You have folks in certain sections of Greenville County or here in Richland or Lexington County where you basically have people who say, listen, I'm pro-life, but my constituents that I represent in this republic form of government do not all agree with that. And if I want to be able to continue serving in this, you're putting me at jeopardy by forcing my hand on a bill that we all know the public is not in favor of at this time.
It was overwhelming. It certainly was overwhelming. That's why we produced this show.
Yes.
To let people know what is going on. And it does mean something to you. And you have a voice outside of just casting your vote. Like Catherine said, you can go and you can testify at these public hearings if you have a connection to a particular issue. And that's why this is so very important that we do each and every week. All right, shifting our attention to boating season. It's always boating season in South Carolina,
It's never
right?
not boating season, especially on a Sunday like today.
That's right. Interesting statistic here in South Carolina. Shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Roughly 360,000 people own a boat in this state. We probably know that if we've been anywhere near a waterway in the state of South Carolina. But the graphic tells the tale.
The thing that we deal with,
Taxes.
South
That's the draw
Carolina
here.
has the highest boat taxes in America. And this little stat that you see right here on the screen, that's just a county by county comparison of York County and Cherokee County up there in the upstate compared with neighboring counties. Joining us this morning, the president and CEO, the founder of the South Carolina Boating and Fishing Alliance, Geddes Brannon. Geddes, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Dave and Brian. Good to be here.
Geddes, we have a situation in South Carolina where we are paying exorbitantly higher rates to own a boat than our neighboring states and apparently more than the rest of the country.
Not even a little bit higher, Dave. We're talking 76% higher than North Carolina, the counties you just showed. Georgia, 76% higher, just a little bit higher than 76. In Richland County, if you own a $50,000 boat, you're paying $2,800. Same thing in Lexington County, maybe higher. So you look at Charlotte, that same boat's $378.
Wait, you cross the state. Depends upon what side of the lake you're on.
That's right. And
what
Lake
side of the
Wylie,
border?
you might, if
Right.
you're unlucky and you're on the York side, other
Right.
than all the great things that come with South Carolina, you
Well,
pay
that's just
exorbitantly high on your boat property tax.
So when you look at the difference between that, how does that impact what people do with? I mean, do people cross state lines? Do they take their boats to other places, or how do they? Is there a way to kind of avoid some of this tax but still have it here?
So what we're seeing on boats over about $120,000, which are a higher end boat, no doubt, those boats aren't even thinking about registering here anymore. We've priced ourselves out of a smaller but bigger pie of tax dollars. Those boats are going out of state. We're only getting the smaller boats. So you think about the John boats, the bass boat owners, pontoon boat owners, those are the folks that are bearing the brunt of this tax. And so the larger boats don't even stay here anymore.
How did we get to a point where we're 76% higher than some of our neighboring states?
It's a good question. So if you look at the entire United States, we estimate there are 13 states that have property taxes on boats. The second highest state and the highest county in Virginia is still 49% less than South Carolina. So we're not sure how we've gotten here, but here we are today, and we're trying to have a tax cut for over 360,000 South Carolinians.
So we were talking earlier, and you talk about the fact that San Francisco's boat taxes are lower.
$588 on the same value boat.
New York
doesn't even have property taxes on boats.
So
We can't go that
we're
far.
not going that far. But still, I mean, you think about this though, Geddes. What can be done? I know that you've got legislation that you're pushing through both the House and the Senate to try to get something done to bring some level of relief on this. What's happening on that particular
So there are
front?
two bills in the South Carolina State House right now. S317, led by Senator Goldfinch and others in the South Carolina Senate, is a 50% tax cut. And H3858, which is in the House right now, it's Gary Brewer, representative out of Dorchester, Somerville area, and 40 sponsors, bipartisan sponsors. Great friend and friend to the news station here and other places around the Midlands. Todd Rutherford's one of our main fighters on this. We have bipartisan support saying boat taxes are too high in South Carolina. Not only that, on H3858, it eliminates the need for outboard engine titles and taxes and titling. We're one of only 6 states that still does that.
So we've got a taxation system, it sounds like, Brian, that, I mean, let's just say it's a bit antiquated.
It's a little out of whack.
A little out of whack.
A little out of whack.
So we were looking at that map a little while ago, and it's a county by county difference. So is this something that the counties are collecting, or is this a state tax, or is it a mix of both?
It's a great question. I think a lot of folks think that this money might go to our natural resource, might go to DNR, but it doesn't. We have some of the lowest registration fees in the country at $10. $10.
$10 to register a boat.
$10 to register your boat, and that's
that
goes to DNR. That goes to the resource.
Okay.
That's conservation funding. And what we have here are the highest property taxes in the country, so the resource gets none of that. That goes to the counties. It has nothing to do with boats.
So this is a county by county, 46 different levels of taxes, but they're all at this rate that is much higher than we see in neighboring states.
So Horry County and a couple other counties do have a 6% rate, excuse me, but those counties are still, as we're seeing, are still higher than the rest of the country.
Wow.
So from where we sit now, what do we need people to do that own a boat in this state? We've got to call your legislator.
Call your
Is that what you do?
legislators, ask them to support H3858, S317, show up at the hearings. Hopefully we'll have some in the next couple of weeks to get some money back in the pockets of South Carolinians, and hopefully, I was at the boat show a couple of weeks ago and had a lot of folks come up and say, man, I just don't want to buy a new boat or don't even want to get a better used boat because the property taxes are so high. And if you think about that, you're paying property tax year after year after year. This isn't a one-time hit. And so if we can get folks to contact their legislators and let them know that we don't need to be the highest property taxed boat state in the entire country, we'll be good to go.
Okay, so think about this from this standpoint. You have a $50,000 boat. And say you own that boat for 10 years. Mm-hmm. You're paying nearly $28,000 on top of the $50,000.
You've owned it twice.
You've owned it twice.
You're renting your boat back from the government.
That's just not something I ever want to talk about, renting my boat from a government. If people want to learn more about what you do, keeping in mind, boating and fishing in South Carolina is a $6.5 billion industry in this state. That is huge. I mean, that's ranking way up there with different levels of manufacturing.
We have the 3 largest fish and tackle manufacturers in the world. We have 28 boat makers here. 6 of the top 10 boat makers in the world per volume are here in South Carolina. And we're all coming together with our boat owners in the state to say higher taxes equals less access. It's a burden to access. We got to get people out on the waterways to enjoy what South Carolina has to offer And if the number says it's 360,000 now, no telling where we could go if we have more competitive taxes. And if we are charged money, let's put it back into the resource.
People want to learn more, they go to
Lowerboattaxes.com.
That's
Easy
pretty
enough.
simple.
Easy
Sounds
enough.
good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate you coming. And finally this week, just 2 days ago, the state of South Carolina putting to death inmate Brad Sigmund by firing squad. The first in this state's history. Just the fourth in the U.S. in the last 50 years. The three others in the state of Utah. Brad Sigmund choosing to die by firing squad as opposed to electric chair or lethal injection. Now, we've added a new voice to our conversation for this final segment. Of course, I have Catherine Glenn Foster with me here, but also adding Reverend Hillary Taylor from South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. It was a long road getting here. A lot of requests for more information about the lethal injection process because shield laws don't allow that to be released. That's how we got to this, to a method of execution that some observers had called barbaric.
That is correct.
What does that say about where we are, I guess, in this process? Because you fight against this every single day.
Yes. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for asking that question. So lethal injection is death by injecting poison into somebody's body, and Brad was faced with an impossible choice of, do I get cooked by the electric chair? Do I allow the state to pump me with poison that we don't know anything about and has taken more than 20 minutes to kill other people previously? Or do we allow, a firing squad to blow my chest out? And he chose the most honest option for execution and also the one that he knew would be the most effective and the quickest.
Now, you had a personal connection with Brad Sigmund. Knew him personally. How did you first meet Brad, and can you tell us a little bit about his thought process leading up to Friday?
Of course. I first met Brad because I contacted lawyers who are capital defense attorneys. I had had some experience in my grad school, my seminary training with anti-death penalty work, and they called me back several months later saying, hey, we actually would love for you to be a spiritual advisor to somebody who may have an execution date scheduled in the next year. This was 2020 at the time. And somebody who is extremely spiritual and might need some extra support from the outside. And so that was in 2020. We became friends in fall of 2020 and remained friends until his execution.
One more question. You talked about him choosing what he considered the most honest form of punishment here. A lot of people have raised questions about the shield law. I know the ACLU is challenging it right now. Where do you stand on that? Would you like them to be more open about how that process works?
I think that the people of South Carolina deserve to know how that process works. We currently don't know anything about the drug's potency. We don't know anything about whether or not these are in fact the actual drugs that they say they have purchased. We don't know the name of the organization that is making these drugs. And if we have to know the name and the cost of the tar that is being paved on our roads, then we deserve to know what is being used for our taxpayer dollars. In the state of Arizona, lethal injection drugs have been as much as $1.5 million. And if that's costing us a bunch of money here in South Carolina, I can think of a lot more and better uses that money could go to.
Thank you for joining our conversation again this week. We know we had you in here a few weeks ago. You two had a very, very thoughtful conversation about the personal relationship that you had with Brad Sigmund and many men and women who are serving time in the state's prison system. The state of South Carolina does not allow interviews with inmates, so that you are a connection point to them. So if you would like to see that full interview, we of course will have that posted for you online at WACH.com. Again, thank you for joining us as we wrap up this edition of Connect to the Capitol. We want to take a quick look at what's coming up in the week ahead that we're kind of keeping our eyes on for next week. A few items, if you could show that, Marcus, quickly. This is what we know is going to happen. There will be budget debate started by the House coming up tomorrow on Monday. And the question we addressed about 10 or 15 minutes ago, will the Senate again take up tort reform, which is something that looks like it might officially be over with, at least in their format of that particular proposal. Thank you again for joining us this week for Connect to the Capitol. We'll see you on Sunday.